Thank you so much, George. I appreciate you. I appreciate being here. It's very nice. I've never been here. I want to check and see if you can hear my bell. Sometimes people can't hear it. Can you hear that? Great, great. Well, we are going to talk about one of my very favorite subjects, and I'm going to lead us in a little bit of a meditation to start here. I mean, the meditation will be a good length, but my I'm actually going to try to put this on my gallery view here so I can see all of you rather than me. You may want to see me, but I want to see all of you. Um, let's see here, just a second. Sorry. There. So I'm going to lead us in a little bit of guidance for this meditation, kind of point a little bit towards what I want to talk about just for the beginning period. And then we'll sit in silence. And then I'll talk a little bit about this whole idea of emptiness. So let's get in a comfortable position as practitioners, but I'd ask you to begin by just noting what you hear. Just taking a moment, turn your attention towards your ears and what are you hearing? Could be the fan, could be a motor, traffic outdoors, could be silence. Maybe it's just my voice. But just notice here, turning your attention, noticing, hearing. Get a sense that you don't actually have to do anything to hear. It just happens. It was happening before you turned your attention to it. And it will happen long after you turn your attention towards something else. But in this moment here, you can turn your attention towards hearing. Very easy. And you could just sit here and hear. There's no effort to it. It's naturally arising. And the fact that the sound changes constantly could keep your attention. Even silence can ebb and flow and seem thick and up close and seem thin and far away. You could do the same for feeling the body's posture. You could just shift your attention to feeling the sensation of the body's posture. The felt sense of the pressure in the chair or the cushion. It's blood moving, and nerves shifting, changing. Temperature of the body changing depending on where you're at. Some parts could be hot and some parts could be cold. But there's this easily recognizable experience, phenomena, by simply inclining your attention to sensations arising, passing away in the body. Pressure, tingling, temperature. There could be aches, but it's not solid, kind of ebbs and flows. All kinds of sensations. And you could sit here. These sensations were experienced before you inclined your attention to it, and they will continue after you move on to something else. So you could notice sensation. One more. You could notice the body breathing at the belly, the chest. The body was breathing and has continued to breathe since your birth. It has never stopped breathing. It will breathe long after your attention fades from it until your death. Doesn't have anything to do with you. It will happen regardless of whether you attend to it or not. But you could put your attention on the breath and notice its movement, shifting, changing. Deep breaths, thin breaths, shallow breaths, short breaths, fast breaths, slow breaths. And like sound and sensation and breathing, at some point you could notice thinking, just thoughts, some imagery, storyline, narrative comes to mind, and you begin to think of it. It's okay, it's not you doing that either. You're not hearing, you're not sensing the body sensations, you're not breathing. You're just inclining your attention towards it. Sort of like bringing something to the foreground. So thinking could be in the foreground and breathing could recede to the background. Still happening, just in the background. You could learn to sense that and bring the breathing forward to the foreground and let the thinking recede to the background. Do that with sensations, sound. It's just a practice of recognizing all of these phenomena happen just continuously, coming, going, arising, passing. We can bring our attention to it, but it doesn't change their continuity. So as we sit here, see if you can notice what's in the foreground of your attention. Could be thoughts. That's okay. But can you sense that the breathing is happening in the background still? Body is still sitting here. Pressure, tingling, sounds are still rising, passing away. See if you could choose where to put your attention. That's our practice. We'll sit quietly and practice with this. There's no right way to do it, no wrong way, no best way, no worst way. It's all practice, just as it's arising in your experience with you. And if you practice, you might see some things that you didn't see before. I love this practice, and I love it because of what I'm going to talk about. So I want to read a poem. No, let me first just frame this, and then I'll read the poem. So we're going to talk a little bit here about emptiness. And emptiness in Dharma is one of those intellectual things that, scholars have been talking about for ages in the Dhamma. Deep, deep, deep learned people have studied in the Dhamma this emptiness. And I'd like to put it in a little bit of a framing here so we can understand, because it's not like that scholarly discourse of emptiness is somehow bad, or I'm not even judging it. But think of some of the greatest music you've ever heard, some of the greatest art you've ever seen, movies. I mean, this artistic creation, some understanding of it. And there could be scholars that have gone into deep discussion over the years about this great art or some sculpture or some movie. And the depths of it could be big. That's one side of it. But the other side of it is what makes it great. It's just what it does to people when they see it, when they hear it, when they experience it in any way. And that, I guess you could call it subjective understanding when you come upon some great artistic work, is no less valuable than the deep scholarly conversations that are had about that same work. They are just two different things. And so I want to talk about emptiness in this subjective understanding, the possibility of what the Buddha brought forth out of something that you experience on a subjective level. And you could begin to see some things that he was pointing to. So that framing, we're not taking away from the scholarly depth of discussion around emptiness. And I'm not trying to diminish the depth of what emptiness is. But if we only hold it as some scholarly understanding, those of us with regular limited, barely very many words in Pali, I know probably about the same as you. So does that mean I can't really grasp what the Buddha's pointing to in emptiness? I don't think so. So that's what I want to talk about, is how all of us as regular lay practitioners can begin to practice with the depth of the Buddha's teachings in our ordinary lives. And I want to start with a poem. If you've ever gone to a retreat with me, you probably have heard this poem, because I love this poem. I think it's like significant if we're going to talk about emptiness. So it's a poem called Longing by Julie Cadwallader Stubbs. This is what Julie says. Consider the black-poll warbler. It's a bird about this big. So consider the black-poll warbler. She tips the scales at 1 ounce before she migrates, taking off from the seacoast to our east, flying higher and higher, ascending 2 or 3 miles during her 80 hours of flight until she lands in Tobago, north of Venezuela. 3 days older and weighing half as much. She flies over open ocean almost the whole way. Oh, she is not so different from us. The arc of our lives is a mystery too. We do not understand and cannot see what guides us on our way, that longing that pulls us towards light. Not knowing, we fly onward, hearing the dull roar of the waves below. Now, I think this poem is emptiness. And I'm going to see if I can help you see what I mean. If Miss Blackpoll Warbler were a human being, she would be bitching the entire time, complaining about why her wings are this big and she has to flap them over ocean for 3 days. She would be looking at the seagulls and all the other birds saying, why don't they have to do this? Why do I have to do this? And the complaints and the misery over what she has to do by nature. It has nothing to do with her desire or her lack of desire. It is nature. And this is her birthright to make this pilgrim or this migration every single year. What the Buddha was pointing to as emptiness, I think, is all of the added layering on that we do as human beings, and how learning to see how unnecessary it is to our existence in the world. And that layering on, if we were ever to remove it, our capacity to be with life would be light and free. And I suspect this Blackpoll Warbler, she just flies. She ascends her 2 to 3 miles and she flies for 3 days. And when she gets to Tobago, she settles down. But in the interim, there are very few places for her to rest. Since she's flying over ocean, she just flies. Just flies. In effect, it is empty of the added weight of mental torment, this added weight of the complaining nature of the human mind. So that's what I want to talk about, this emptiness of this. Because when the Buddha got awakened, well, first let me go back 1 second. I looked up emptiness. So we gotta do one more thing. We have to first make sure we're clear. This is about our individual experience. Begin to kind of see what it is that we're talking about here, this mental weightedness we put on our lives. And then there's one more thing here, is the translation of emptiness. This word itself in English. I don't know what emptiness means in other languages, but I looked it up in English. And this is what the English definition says emptiness means: containing nothing, not occupied or inhabited, lacking reality or substance, or meaning or value, void of any sense. Foolishness, marked by the absence of human life, activity, and content, or comfort. So no human life, no activity, no comfort. It's no wonder that we begin to put this word emptiness in kind of this isolation, annihilation idea. It's no wonder that we think of the kind of renunciate life monastics live and think, oh my God, I can't do that emptiness because it would take away all of the enjoyment in life. It would just be a massive mess. That's not my life. I don't want to live like that. And people would come to the Buddha and say, we like, there's a sutta where a lay practitioner went to the Buddha and asked him, like, what do you do for us? We like laying in the bed, eating fine foods with lots of children. So lots of sex, lots of good food, hanging out, lazy, in the Sunday, like a Sunday morning, hanging out. That's what we want to do. And he said that the talk of renunciation was like a sheer drop off for the masses. And that's where you lose us. The Buddha didn't get offended by that. He kind of like the practitioner wanted to know what could the Buddha share for them to increase their sense of well-being and happiness. And so the Buddha basically told him how to practice with the Eightfold Path. The point that I'm pointing to is this isn't about whether you are a renunciate or a lay practitioner. Emptiness and this understanding of emptiness, to me, is fundamental to understanding the liberative aspects of Dharma. And without beginning to approach this idea of emptiness, we relegate our liberative practice to just some feel-good, maybe I can handle what's going on kind of practice. Some psychological kind of tool that I use to get me through the day. But there is something fundamentally different about the Buddha's awakening. He was not pointing to how to fly to Tobago. He was talking about this possibility that you could liberate yourself from the mental dukkha and weight that we add to our trip to Tobago. Tobago is a flight that is just going to be difficult, but it doesn't have to be just the major disruption that it can become. So a couple of things about this emptiness, what I think we could begin to see it as. When the Buddha awoke, when he did his awakening, he said that he saw something that had not been seen before. That is a phrasing that sticks with me. In fact, before he even went through his awakening, there was a moment when he was basically dying and he had a memory of sitting quietly at his father's festival. He was in samadhi and there was all this stuff going on. And he considered to himself, what is that? Why was I so still in the midst of so much chaos? And I was still. Now, this man had practiced all kinds of deep concentration. He had practiced all kinds of ascetic practices. He was clearly a determined, strong practitioner, without a doubt. I mean, he didn't practice just randomly. He went to great teachers and learned the skills that they taught. Practiced it. Wasn't getting him any further from the mental torment. He could go into deep concentration, absorption states, and then come back out. And he'd still probably be upset with laying on the ground, just like you and me. So what is it he saw in that moment? He saw something that was intriguing to him. And he said, in a sutta, it said that he said, might there be another way? So here in this moment, he saw something, and what I think he saw from my perspective is he saw the futility of doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. He saw the futility of that. and decided to try something different. He wasn't quite sure what it was, but he was going to try something different. And he basically left his previous teachings. In fact, all his friends left him. As soon as he started eating to get his strength back, to get some energy so he could practice, his friends left him. They thought he couldn't make it, couldn't cut it. So here he is all by himself. He's pretty much left his practice. He's left everything he knew, and he's heading out into this path to see something, to understand a moment in his life that he doesn't even quite know how to find it. He had the skill, though, of mindfulness, and he began to steady his mind and just notice what was arising. The way you can notice sound arising. You can notice how the mind moves from sound to thoughts to body sensations. You could notice how the mind goes to a body sensation it likes and then tries to make the whole sit about that, how great you are. You go to that same sensation and it's unpleasant, and how the mind will convince you that meditation is not for you. You shouldn't be doing this. This is going to hurt you. And you could begin to see that you don't even have to participate in it at all. You can watch what the mind does and how it sets in motion how you believe your experience is. What you believe is happening. You can get a sense of something. You don't even have to see it. You can get a sense of something. A person. You just meet someone for the first time. You don't even know them, but you get a sense of them. And immediately you're like, they're not safe. They're not safe. I know that. I can't trust them. And you will act accordingly around them simply because you got a sense they were not safe. Or you got a sense that this person is really nice, really friendly. This is someone I could put my trust in. You put your trust in them. They are not good people at all. You should have put your trust in the other person that you thought was not so good. But the mind is doing this based on association. It has learned all these associations the way we were all on this call taught. Be bird blue. Be bird blue. That's it. We taught this. And so the mind begins to use association, and any way that it calculates its association, it then labels something. Labels it, gives it a little check mark, pleasant, unpleasant, neither, and sends us on our way. If it's unpleasant, it forces us to get away from it. If it's pleasant, forces us to grab a hold of it. If it's neutral, it just ignores it, keeps on moving on to something else. This is hardwired in us. It doesn't have anything to do with whether you're a good person, a bad person, whether you're easily likable or not. It's just hardwired. So what the Buddha learned sitting there was that if he could begin to challenge that notion that just because something is unpleasant, it is bad, something is pleasant, it is good, and he began to notice things that would otherwise be neutral. He began to pay much attention to it. And gradually, as he went through the practice, he began to see some things. Some things got illuminated to him. And he says he saw things he had not seen before, heard things he had not heard before. What he ultimately described was 4 Noble Truths and the 12 links of the dependent origination. And what he described in this dependent origination was this ability to see how things unfold. See how things come into being. And when we're in retreat, sometimes towards the end of the retreat, you can see how your thoughts come into play from just looking at something. You can see how the mind begins to operate. You can see the fabrication of it, how it makes stuff up. You can even see how it pushes us to follow whatever its conclusions are, and what it takes to not follow that. You can see that oftentimes the Four Noble Truths is saying the first step to awakening, to being liberated from this mental torment, is your willingness to be with difficulty. And when you're willing to be with difficulty, you can begin to see how you are promoting that from the mind's association, how you can actually let go of your gluedness to the mind's opinion, association, and how liberating that is. But to see any of this, you cannot have it be about you. It cannot be about you. It cannot be about whether you're a good person, bad person. It cannot be about whether Buddha could not have sat there and came to this awakened place if he was still grumbling about his friends leaving him to die because he took something to eat. Imagine us. We got friends, we're all hanging together. This is hard work. We're working hard. You're almost dying. Somebody offers you something to eat and you take it, and then they all leave you. We would be sitting there grumbling about how unfair that is to us, how they should be here and help you. Look at what I'm seeing. I'm actually on my way. You should be here with me. You should see this too. He did not have any of that. He may have had some moments of anger because he definitely talked about having thoughts of ill will. But instead of being lost in the thoughts of ill will, he watched, what does it do to my mind? What does it do to my experience when thoughts of ill will come up? So the thing I'm pointing to is that when we're trying to practice with emptiness, what we are trying to begin to see is how much of this moment are we actually experiencing the direct contact with the moment, and how much of it is our minds grumbling over the top. This is not an easy thing to see. It's why we have to practice lots and lots and lots. Because if you are a parent and you have a child, you know how quickly to get the baby when it's a newborn ready to go. You got it timed to almost a science. I've had 2 kids. Time it to a science. Get them all ready, get their clothes on, then you get your clothes on, you're out the door. Nothing. Quick. It's all perfection. And then comes the shoe tying moment when they have to tie their own shoes. And everything slows down to a crawl. You almost have to get them started on the shoe tying a good 20 minutes before you get out the door. Because if you wait till the last minute, everything is going to stop until they get their loops together. And you can do it really quick and let's go. But it's like, no, they can do it. And they mess up and they can do it. And they mess up and you just sit there and wait for them to tie their shoes. All of us have gone through the tying of shoes ourselves. But now we can tie our shoes without even thinking. Because this mind, once it learns something, it keeps it. It keeps it, it remembers. What we want the mind to remember is how to steady its attention in the present moment. Remember to stay here in the present moment, not just associate this moment with something from the past or project something into the future and assume it knows what this moment is about, but to stay here. And so the Buddha's fundamental meditations, body, feeling tones, thoughts and emotions, and the relatedness that we have, which is the dharmas, like hindrances or, seven factors, how we are relating to the moment. Those are the four frames of reference that you can look at this moment through, and you can find your way to the exact present moment. So you can just watch the body. What are the ears picking up? I cannot believe how many times I have been in mental torment and just asked myself, what are the ears hearing? They are not hearing nothing. Maybe a hum of the motor. I'm sitting in the living room and maybe it hears the hum of the refrigerator, but the mind is freaking out. And the ears are just hearing nothing, quiet, maybe a bird. The body is just sitting there on the couch doing nothing. It doesn't feel anything. It doesn't feel bad. There's no necessarily painful feelings, nothing. But the mind had a memory come through, just a passing thought. And that passing thought caught me in this whirlwind. My direct experience, other than the mind, is fine. And it's learning to begin to see what's actually happening in the moment. To do this, we need emptiness. We need to empty out the idea that we have to be a certain kind of practitioner, a certain level, a certain person. We have to have a certain mind. I have ADD. When I first started in the practice, I didn't think I would ever be able to watch breath. That wasn't even thinkable to me. And now I could sit for hours if I wanted to, because it doesn't have anything to do with whether you have ADD or you don't have ADD. It has to do with this willingness to be interested in something enough that you would like to stay with it, steady your attention on it. Let me watch it and see what happens. Let me just see. Some of my best meditative sits have been with a scattered mind. I have seen more about how the mind operates during a sit full of scattered thoughts than I ever understood in a quiet mind. Quiet minds are quiet. Scattered minds, very informative. I have learned more from having discomfort during a sit than when the body is all easy and everything is smooth. But when I have discomfort, I can see just how much the mind will push me to get up out of that seat because it doesn't like something. And yet the discomfort itself, I didn't like it, but it wasn't like the end of the world. I could sit with it. And so that emptiness is not to take out the life or the preciousness of the moment. What the emptiness is doing is taking away that mental layer so we can just experience the moment as it is. Just this moment. Not even, I'm going to be with this moment forever. No. Can I just be with it 1 minute? Can I give myself 1 minute of just being with it and seeing what is the big deal about all of this? And so basically to conclude, it doesn't matter whether you're a lay practitioner, you are a monastic, whether you just started on the path, you've been on it for 15, 20, 30 years. Any one of us could at some point think to ourselves, might there be another way to look at this? Is there something I'm missing? Is there something I'm not seeing here? We could begin to question that mental chatter that runs our lives and instead begin to see what the other sense doors are telling us about the moment. Less about you, more about experience. And the more you can just learn to get interested in the phenomena of experience itself, the less you there will be there, and the more empty the experience will be. Just experience. Maybe difficult, maybe not. But it's not up to you to fix it, make it otherwise. It's up to you to sort of know what's happening. That's the way I would look at it. So maybe we'll stop there. And thank you so much for your kind attention. We'll see if there's a little bit of time for questions. See if we can flesh this out a little bit more for you. See what your thoughts are. So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, and we'll kind of, we'll put your hand up and we'll kind of see if there's anything. I'm just looking here in the chat here. Turn off the stories we tell ourselves. That's exactly what I'm talking about. We live more out of our stories than we do out of reality. And the stories aren't necessarily about the present moment. Our stories are probably more about what happened when we were 5, trying to tie our shoes, less about what's happening right now. So, yes. I see a hand. Dawn, please join us.
Hello. So I'm Dawn from Honolulu, Hawaii. And I'm kind of fascinated with how the mind has changed over time. And we can see it worldwide and in our country. Our population is aging. And so what's happening is that the aging don't realize that if they live longer and longer, that they will actually be going back into the phases of being a child. However, I was wondering about the concepts of delusions, illusions, perceptions, and how the mind thinks it's real or it actually takes over the mind. And that I find that people may get stuck in that delusion, or that I call maybe an obsessive behavior. For example, like I have to go to the bathroom. Part of my background is that I'm a geriatrician. And so over the last 10 years, I've seen a big change where there's so many people with memory issues, but with that, which is really prominent, is behaviors.
So what's your question?
So my question is, how do you get to a place where our minds are like that, and that
How do you get
delusion,
to a place where your minds are like what I'm talking about?
right?
Or what you're talking about?
What I'm just wondering where we talk about our mind and it's empty, but the thing is that our minds actually have gotten to a place where it's like a broken record. and that
Yes,
people get stuck there. So I can tell you one of the behaviors that I see often is an elderly person that has to go to the bathroom. And we're talking about every second, all night and everything like that. So I'm just wondering, and then people having delusions, that so
yes.
and
I
so is
think I
fooling
understand
around.
now.
So
I
I'm
think
just
I understand
wondering
now.
why that has happened, where, that.
Okay, let me answer here. Dawn, I'm not sure how our minds get stuck. I do think it has my personal opinion, I'm not doctor or anything, but my personal opinion is that it is the nature of our television and the way that we live our lives. There is this looping mechanism that just sort of happens. We're all kind of used to it. Things just keep coming at us all the time, same thing. And there's a way that we can get stuck. I get stuck in stuff. But the Buddha's practice, it requires the same kind of looping mechanism of prying, of returning again and again, beginning again and again and again to unstuck ourselves. So beginning again and again and again. In your work, I cannot tell you how it is that minds come into the world they come into in your work. But what I can tell you is that if you begin to practice yourself and begin to see when your own mind is stuck and begin to practice how do I unstick my own mind? Because your mind's getting stuck also. You just may not be getting stuck in something as simple as going to the bathroom, but we get stuck in our own obsessions. It is the nature of mind. So, with your basic skill and wisdom in your own field, you may be able to see and understand more if you, in this practicing with your Dharma and your practice, in order to understand what's happening in another person's mind. I would think that that would go a long ways. I mean, it's how every person in whatever field they're in, they can use their skill to practice mindfulness and understand the career they're actually in. That's what I did as a lawyer for years and years and years. And so that would be what I would say. Less about how is this happening? Why are we here in this state? And more about trying to practice when your mind is stuck and see what it is that you see. What is it that you can learn from this? Get interested in the nature of that stuck mind. And then your own skill and wisdom, you may very well be able to understand and speak on it with your clients and with the world around you. That's what my thoughts would be. Thank you so much. Ruth, how about you?
Hi there. Thank you for this fantastic talk. You mentioned, can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes, I can.
You mentioned that you were ADD and that
Yeah.
you didn't ever be able to sit, and now you can sit for ages. And my son he's not ADD, but I don't think, but he's dyslexic and he has tremendous trouble sitting. It's partly a question of our age and phones and all of that fast-moving, overstimulating world. I'd love to hear more about that. And also if you had any creative ways to frame that for an adolescent, because it's a difficult, I could talk to it about it to an adult, but to talk to it to an adolescent, it's another thing. I just wondered if you had any points.
I'm not sure, other than in truth, it takes a long time. So if it's something that you're trying to, I think my initial thoughts were, how do I make my mind stop traveling so much? How do I make my mind be like the minds that it sounded like people were saying when they were talking, when I would go to Dharma talks, and they would talk about the still mind, and I just didn't have it, and I didn't know how to get it, and I didn't know how to make it happen. But what I did begin to see is that if it was less about me trying to be a certain kind of mind and me being willing to accept that my mind was okay the way it is. It was okay that my mind was scattered. I didn't have to try to make it not scattered. And what the mind ultimately did in my accepting it just as it is, that is what enabled it to settle. So, as strange as it might seem to some of you, I steady my mind because there's always things moving. At first, I thought the moving was the problem, and I needed to stop all the moving. So that's what a settled mind is. Nothing's moving. And what I realized is, for someone with ADD, the constant moving is actually what keeps our attention. And when things are not steady, it starts moving all over the place. So I started noticing all the different stuff that was going on, just sitting there noticing, and that actually helped me steady the mind. That was something I had to learn. So I have a friend, Devin Berry, who said he went to inner city to teach kids mindfulness. They didn't really get the whole mindfulness thing, and they weren't really trying. So what he did was he brought in a whole bunch of albums, jazz musicians, pop musicians, rhythm and blues, whatever, all these different albums of these music genres, and then had them listen to it and find one instrument or one voice and stay with that voice, stay with that instrument. And that began to help them steady their minds because they found something to get interested in. So if I were you, I would look for what it is your son is most interested in and see if there's a way that you could help him steady his attention and explain it to you. You would be sitting there listening to him help you understand something. And that could begin to help him steady his attention. But the bottom line is, it takes quite a bit of work. And so, unless you're willing to stay with it for the long haul, which could be 10 years, this practice is about non-self. So it's about allowing whatever that is to be as it is. And this is the way it's supposed to be. So this is the way it's supposed to be. And how do we move in the world with this as it is? Do you see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's the way I would approach it. Like, this is the way it's supposed to be. So how do we move in the world in a way that helps everybody, him and you and the rest of the family? You see? So I hope that helps.
Great, thank you.
I see. I'm glad you spelled this out. So it's Ashalopelson. Is that, how bad am I doing?
No, you're doing good. Yeah, I had to put the phonics. Sorry, I can't be on
Yes,
camera.
thank you.
Sholopilsin.
Oh,
Sholopilsin. It's 5 syllables.
I see, as Shalopinson. I like that. That's good. I'm glad you put the syllables there.
Thank you. It means venerable axolotl.
Ah, good.
A new name for me, and I'm trying to support people pronounce it because it took me 4 days to learn it.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you.
Well, I really like your poem you shared about the bird, because I'm trying to find way to, my bird right now, its wings are on fire.
Yes.
right? It's on fire. And I know with the dharma practice, you know, there's love and kindness and so forth. But recently, I'm trying to figure out what to do with this situation that I had to file grievance. And due to, I feel like ill will practices from providers.
Yes.
And I don't want to feel guilty, right? I don't want to feel like a guilty bird, like I'm complaining to you guys, which I don't think I'm complaining. I need to find a way to differentiate both, because I know I have rights as a consumer.
Yes.
And I want to take care of that anger and that guilt, because I know it's going to come up. I have to actually proceed with writing a letter today before I have to turn it in. But that
So
bird, you know.
I
Yeah.
think the way I would approach my own kinds of things when I'm dealing with injustices or things that I think are unfair or I need to speak up around is I let go of the result. I leave the result to the universe, but I do what I believe is the right thing to do. And that's how I think our anger gets caught up in the result. So I'm doing all this effort. You did something wrong. I shouldn't have to be here. I shouldn't even have to be doing this. And there's all this anger, sort of like the Buddha's friends leaving him. And then he could sit there in his practice angry at them. But instead, it's sort of like this is the moment he happens to be in. So in this moment, you happen to be in a situation where you need to write a letter. And based on your own knowing and your own understanding in rights of consumers, you need to write this letter. And so you are going to write this letter and you are going to follow whatever actions you need to do in order to have this be heard. But what I think, if you are tied to the end result, meaning that your efforts have to make this happen, you will get caught in the web of it. But your actions are, simply speaking, doing what's right in this situation. That's what your actions are. They're based on your own knowing, and this is the right thing to do. So you do that. And then you let the universe take care of what actually happens as a result of it. Sometimes things move in a good way, sometimes they don't. But I used to be a trial lawyer, I was a prosecutor, and sometimes I would have trials and we would win. And sometimes I would have trials and we would lose. The defendant would be found not guilty. But what I used to tell every single victim that I'm doing this trial with is, it's not my job to decide the outcome. That's the jury's job. My job is to prosecute the case as best as I can. And that's what I did, as best I can. So even in cases where I lost, most every victim I ever had would be like, it's all right, I understand. Because you do the best you can and you let the results speak for themselves. All right?
Thank you. Now I feel like a bird that's gonna deliver the letter and keep on flying.
That's what I'm
Thank you
talking about.
so
You
much.
just keep on flying. That's right. That's exactly it. You just keep on flying.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Victoria, how about you? We'll take Victoria's question and then we'll take the who's next? Jane. We'll take Victoria and Jane, and then that'll be our time. Go ahead,
Thank
Victoria.
you. Great to
Welcome.
see you again, Tuere, and welcome to Sangha Live. I didn't realize you hadn't been here before.
I had never been here.
I feel
That's
like I've seen you all over the world in all the Sanghas. So I'm glad to see you here. I'm wondering, I in this time, there's probably not much time to discuss this, but I really appreciate your talk, Frishva. What I love so much about your teachings is like totally down to earth, and the shoe tying thing, I immediately had flashbacks to my daughter. Like that was a great analogy. I'm wondering about this sense of like the story and everything. I think of Papancha and So like the relationship between the emptiness and the papancha is something I don't know, that's what came up in your talk, and I just wonder if you could say a few words. I know there aren't many minutes, but whatever, I'll take whatever you can offer in the time allowed.
Okay, thank you. So think of papancha as hearing. So the thing that makes papancha so difficult is that we get stuck to it, tied to it, like it's saying something about us or about life or some story. We're kind of glued to it. But if you think about what papancha actually is, it is the mind stringing together sentences and concepts and thoughts, and it just keeps stringing it together. And if you begin to see that this is just like hearing, just like you hear a sound arise and it passes, and another sound arise, it passes, another sound arises, it passes. It's the same way with this thought. If you could begin to see that mind as arising and passing, thoughts are arising and passing. It's why I think the Buddha has thoughts and emotion as the third foundation of mindfulness. So if you sat there, as soon as I realized, wait a minute, we kind of skip over the third foundation. But he said you could sit there and watch thoughts arise and pass away, arise and pass away, arise and pass away. And that steadying your mind on thought can bring you to a level of stillness and establish mindfulness, just like feeling tones, just like breathing. And so that's what I think you'd have to see. Not get lost in papancha is bad, but see it more as, oh, this is the nature of mind thinking the same way ears hear. So this is just my mind thinking, and feel the body sitting and notice, oh, mind is thinking. Mind is thinking. That's it. That's okay. Mind is thinking. Ears are hearing. Body is sensing. Eyes are seeing. Mind is thinking. That's all. Okay?
Fabulous. That to get rid of the judgment. Thank you.
That's right. That's right. Just let it be mind thinking.
Love it. Thank you.
Welcome. Jane, how about you?
I'll be really fast, and I'll just say thank you. This was beautiful. And as a Victoria's still up there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. That as a psychotherapist, I see what you're talking about so much in trauma survivors. And what I find so fascinating is that not only is the wiring changed when you're constantly hearing these things that are getting embedded in your own neurological functioning, that you then start doing that to yourself.
Yep.
And I call it self-inflicted violence or negative self-talk. And there's a lovely technique called RAIN. I don't know if you're familiar with it, where recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And your talk resonated with that kind of exploring and being curious and almost sitting with what you might have thought was discomfort and have it become comfort.
Yes, that's right.
And I think that we see so often people embracing the stories of their childhood and how to let go of those and not repeat those, so you can change the whole pattern of your life to be who you are today, not who you were growing up. And that takes a lot of work, but thank you for what you spoke with with such beautiful eloquence, and the poem. Beautiful, really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, actually, what you said is pretty much what I was saying. Using RAIN is one way to do it. Sitting and using thoughts as the third foundation, that's another way to do it. Just keep telling yourself this, everything is as it is, letting go of the outcomes. These are all ways we can help empty out our projection into some present moment and just be with it as it is. So thank you all very much for your questions, for your time, for your practice. And I hope I see you again.
Thank you.